So today we are doing the Book Bloggers Confessions tag. It's been a while since I've done a tag, so let's get right on into it. Question number 1. Which book most recently did you not finish? So at the time of recording, that would be this book, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is an adult fantasy book, and there were 2 reasons why I ended up DNFing this book. The first reason is that it involves a ton of profanity. Now, I don't mind so much if a book has profanity, provided there is a really valid reason for the profanity to be there. But if every second word that you're going to use or that your characters are going to use is the F word, suddenly it's like the F word is a part of their jargon rather than it actually being there for a valid reason, and that really annoys me. The second reason is that this book very graphically uses terminology regarding leavings that you should be leaving in your bathroom. I hope you get my gist when I say number 1 and number 2. Yeah, so I tried to deal with it because a lot of people say that The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch is a really good book, but by the time I got 30 pages in, I was just screaming in my head, "Stop it!" And I had to put it down. Question number 2. Which book is your guilty pleasure? And my answer for this question would have to be The Selection by Kiera Cass. So this is a book that was originally published in 2012, but I only found out about it 8 years later, in 2020. So people aren't really talking about it much these days, and there are people who do that say this is on the very much young side of the YA spectrum, but I just really love this book and I'm loving this series. I'm about halfway through and I'm guaranteeing that I'm going to finish this series by the end of the year. So this book follows America Singer, who is entered into a competition, kind of like The Bachelor meeting the royal palace of this world, where the winner of the competition will steal the heart of the prince and become the new princess. However, the series is so much more than that. It's not a YA romance, it's a YA dystopian. And the reason for this is because there are issues going on, wars are brewing, a lot of action that occurs at the castle, aside from the princess lessons and the selection process. And all in all, it just makes for an amazing read. I highly recommend it. It is my guilty pleasure. Pick up a copy today. Trust me, if you love dystopians, you will not regret it. Question number 3. Which book would you throw into the sea? Well, you may think that I, who believe damaging a book is a sin, wouldn't have an answer for this question. But I do. I do. It is time to throw your copy of The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien into the sea right now. Woo! In April, I read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy to celebrate a friend of mine's birthday for that month, and I gave them all immunity, meaning that I could not DNF them, which was the worst decision that past younger version of Mr. Francy, he just didn't know, decided to do. Because I will not ever implement that rule again, because this series as a whole for me was torture. But the reason that I'm singling out The Fellowship of the Ring is because it's just not necessary. While Chapter 1 can be saved because it does set us up for what is to come, the rest of the book kind of starts with our characters setting off on a journey, and by the time we get to the end of the book, we are still on this same journey, and nothing has happened. Nothing of significance anyway. Now, among many other things, J.R.R. Tolkien is known more for telling as opposed to showing. So if you don't know the difference, if you are reading a book where someone is showing something that's going on, you are there in the midst of what is going on. If you are there for a telling, it is when a character is most likely retelling other characters of things that happened off screen. J.R.R. Tolkien does this really well. he has some really good ideas for some action-packed scenes that we don't get to see. We just get retold about them after they've happened. It's a very interesting perspective that J.R.R. Tolkien likes to have for this series, because he seems rather inclined to follow the boring perspective as opposed to the action-packed, more entertaining perspective, which I really just don't understand. But anyway, my point and the reason why this is the single book of the whole trilogy, and also then including The Hobbit, that I would throw into the sea is because, aside from chapter 1, this book was pointless. And I'm saying that objectively. Emotionally, I hated this book, but objectively, this book was pointless. Cut out chapter 1, and what are we doing? We're on a journey. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how we're going to get there, and by the time we get to the end of the book, we're still on this journey, and we still don't know where we're going, and we still don't know how we're going to get there. It's pointless. Where's the sea? Can I throw this in there already? Whoop. Question number 4. Which book have you read the most? And I think this will change from 2021 onwards, but as of the time of recording in, September of 2020, my answer has to be Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So, I love Harry Potter. I've read all of these books multiple times, and I love them. And J.K. Rowling is going through a few things at the moment, but I'm really choosing not to even go there. Not only on my channel, I just really don't even want to, look into any of that stuff, because I love the series so much that I'm not going to taint it by views that J.K. Rowling has. That is what it is. She's not destroying this series for me. Anyway, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is book number 3, and this deals with I'm just going to say a time-traveling trope. I'm not going to say anything other than that, but it deals with a time-traveling trope. And I think it is just executed so well, so flawlessly. I mean, there are cons to this book. There are cons to every Harry Potter book, but in saying that, there are so many pros. There are pros. There are pros that outweigh the cons. And this time-traveling trope is always intriguing to me. We also meet a character in this book that goes on to become a very massive character for the remainder of the series. I just love this book so much that whenever I wanted to have a reread prior to 2020, I would turn to Harry Potter, and 9 times out of 10 I would turn to The Prisoner of Azkaban and just keep reading and consuming this book over and 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 over, to the point that doesn't even sound like a word anymore, and over again. Question number 5. Which book would you hate to receive as a present? I mean, if anyone bought me a book as a gift, I would really love the fact that they have put so much time and thought and consideration into buying me something that I will actually love, which are books. A quick side story. It's funny. I've spoken to certain members of my family about things I want for my birthday that I had in May, and Christmas and so on and so forth. And there are certain members of my family who have been saying to me, and I quote, "What would you like, for example, what would you like for Christmas, but don't tell me a book because you got more than enough of those, so what else do you want?" And it's just like, but, I mean, if you really want to get me something from the heart, please get me a book, because you know it's going to get read, and you know I'm going to love it more than anything else. But anyway, if there was one book that I would still be really grateful for externally, but internally I would be seething to receive, it would have to be Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This book is a total nightmare for so many reasons. I ended up DNFing this book after, I think, about 30 pages or something like that. This is a YA fantasy that opens up with a ton of profanity as well as an incredibly graphic sexual assault scene on a minor. I mean, this is not YA, and J. Kristoff apparently who's the writer of this, the author of this book, has apparently gone on records as saying this book was never intended to be a YA, but if it was never intended to be a YA, why was it published as a YA? Who in their right mind said, oh yes, this is a YA. Really, who in their right mind thinks that an incredibly graphic sexual assault scene of a minor is a YA? It's not. And I was so offended by that I came incredibly close to DNFing after that completely gratuitous graphic scene of a sexual assault of a minor played out. But what got me in the end, the straw that broke the proverbial Nevernight camel's back, was the incredibly flowery writing style of J. Kristoff. Man, have I read writing styles that are flowery, overly descriptive, and just... Okay, I'm going to give you the Mr. Francy definition of what a flowery writing style is. It's a writing style where you need to have a dictionary next to you just to get through the book, because you need to try to translate what the heck they're saying, because the author is so caught up. It's like they have an obsession with metaphors and similes and other descriptive narratives that what they are writing is just so hard to understand what they're doing, and they're also taking you out of the plot and distracting you because of how metaphorically flowery the writing is. It's ridiculous. So I not only DNF'd this book, but I very quickly DNF'd J. Kristoff as a writer. Then I went on to see someone else talk about Nevernight, who had DNF'd it 3/4 of the way through, and then went back and ended up reading the rest of it. So they read the whole book. And they said, and I quote, "The book doesn't get any better. In fact, it gets worse as you go along." So I have no guilt in DNFing Nevernight. And unlike other authors that I have trusted after reading one book, I no longer trust J. Kristoff. I don't plan on picking up any of his stuff. Maybe if he co-authors a book with someone else, I might try it if I like the other author. But man, this guy is not for me. If you like a flowery writing style in your read, and you like a book that is an adult in YA clothing, read this book. Question 6 is a question that if you've been following my channel for a while, you will not be surprised by the answer. The question is, which book could you not live without? And the answer is staring you right in the face. It is Mistborn, book number 1, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This book is amazing. Never before and never since have I done a book review saying that saying that any author had revolutionized reading for me. I mean, those are powerful words. Revolutionized reading for me. Mistborn, Mistborn. Mistborn, The Final Empire did that for me. Now, it says Mistborn on the cover, but Mistborn is the name of the series. The book itself is called The Final Empire. A lot of people get really confused because the name Mistborn is on the cover, but it's actually called The Final Empire. Mistborn is a book that follows a girl by the name of Vin, we see her on the cover, who has led a very tough life as part of a thieving crew of all men who treat her horribly. One day, and this is very early on, so it's not a spoiler, one day she is rescued by arguably the best character to be written in any form of literature, in Mr. Francy's opinion, the suave, charismatic Kelsier, love this guy, who takes her under his wing and makes her a part of his crew, where, again, it's a crew of all men aside from Vin, but they are all treating her equally. Vin also finds out that she is a Mistborn. There are 2 types of beings in this world that have magical abilities. There are many types of people, but there are only 2 types of beings that have magical abilities. There are Mistings and Mistborns. Mistings have 1 power that they have access to. Mistborns have all the powers they have access to. It is a hard magic system. So there are limitations, and the limitations to the magic system in Mistborn is that you need to ingest a certain combination of metals in order to be able to access that power. Once that metal has been burnt or flared out, you do not have access to that magical ability again until you have restocked up and ingested more of that metal. This book is set in a world where the evil guy won. I mean, it basically, that's the premise of the book. It's a book set in a world where the bad guy won. So, you know, if we base this off Lord of the Rings, or if we base it off Harry Potter, and we were to say that Lord of the Rings is not a good idea because we all know how I feel about that series, but we'll base it on Harry Potter. For example, let's say that this is a world where Voldemort won and he is ruling, and that's where we open up. So he is a tyrant, he's ruling this world. It's amazing. However I describe this, it's not going to do it justice. Read this book. You won't be disappointed. I don't know anyone who's read this book who have said it's terrible. It's so good. And you know what? There are audio copies available if you can't get your hands on the physical book. So just listen to the audiobooks. I challenge you to come back to me and say, Mr. Francy, this was a horrible read. Because this is amazing, and I'm not the only person who thinks so. Enough rambling, on to the next question. Thank you, Brandon Sanderson. Question number 7 is, which book made you cry the most? And honestly, my answer would be Mistborn: The Final Empire, because I cried at the end of that book. But I'm going to pick something else. Okay, I'm going to go with Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, despite the fact that I haven't cried. We're doing well today. Despite the fact that I haven't cried over this book for a while, I certainly did the first couple of times that I read it. So this book is the only book in the Harry Potter series that has received 4 stars from me. Every other Harry Potter book, including Cursed Child, received 5 stars from me. But there are things that I just don't like about this book. But there is a moment at the end of this book. For those of you who have read it, you know what I'm referring to. For those of you who haven't, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But there is a moment towards the end of the book where something happens. And I tell you what, tears were flooding around the world from Harry Potter fans when this unjustifiable act occurred. And it's certainly the book that made me cry the most outside of Mistborn: The Final Empire. So to the final question, which is question 8, which book cover do you hate the most? So a little bit of backstory, but in, oh goodness, was it February or March? It was really early on with my channel, very early on this year. I decided that I was going to reread a certain series, so I ended up purchasing a boxed set of the first 3 books. I'm not a fan of that edition, and I ended up replacing it. I'm going to show you the cover of the book that I don't like, and then I'm going to show you the version of the book the edition of the book that I replaced it with that I do love. I think there is a clear difference between these 2 covers, and the other one, the second one, is just so much more superior. So, the book I'm referring to is book 1, but I could go with book 1, book 2, or book 3 really, but we're going to go with book 1 of the Vampire Academy series known as Vampire Academy. Okay, so here's the cover, right? So we have a girl, it has a red background, we see the gates of Vampire Academy, we see a little castle there in the background. Isn't this just adorable? It doesn't look like a really trashy YA cover at all. And then we have this cover. Now, when you compare the 2, to me, and different people have different opinions. I mean, hey, the grass is always greener on the other side. There are American booktubers who really don't like the American editions that they have. And then there are people like me from Australia who climb every mountain and ford every stream to buy American cover books. So it really depends. Everyone has different tastes. But to me, when I compare these 2 books, this looks like a very immature, mass-market paperback version of Vampire Academy, where this looks like a much more professional looking book. I'm not really a fan of the sticker, so I can let that go. But I love how this book has the V and the A. I think that looks so good compared to this. And secondly, let's just take a quick look at the 3 books in this version and then the 3 books in this version. In case you're wondering, the only reason I'm hanging on to the original edition is because of nostalgia. I started off reading book 1 with these original covers, but when I next do my massive book unhauling, I'll probably get rid of them. But anyway, book 1, book 2, book 3. New version. Book 1, book 2, book 3. Book 1, mass market paperback, superior edition. Book 2, mass market paperback, superior edition. Book 3, mass market paperback, superior edition. This is the UK edition of The Hero of Ages, and again, there are people in America who prefer the UK edition to the American edition, and I don't understand it, but anyway. So, all of the Brandon Sanderson UK editions are white. They have a white theme, so you can see that here with some of these books. They're white. Okay, so that's that one. And the American edition is this one. And I just think this one is far superior to this one. You may disagree with me, and you may think this is better, and that's totally fine. I think this is more avant-garde. It's very artsy, which is fine, but if I'm looking at these 2 books and wanting to pick up the one that's encouraging me to read it the most, this book is more encouraging me to read it than this one. I just think that American publishers publish better editions of books. I just have a bias. But as I said, there are Americans out there who disagree with me, and they want to go across the pond as much as I do to get the UK version. But anyway, that is the final question for this Book Blogger Confessions tag. I'm going to leave it there. What did you think of those answers? What are yours? Leave them in the comment section below. But in the meantime, I'm letting you go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thanks for watching, and happy reading! Bye!